This morning, we have the privilege of hearing from folks who have been used in other parts of the world. And first up is Leon and Kristen Patrick.
Well, good morning, folks. I'm Leon and Kristen here, and we were given the opportunity in early January to go on a trip with UB Global, which is United Brethren's mission agency, and we had an awesome team. We had a great group of people from all over eastern United States, a couple from Canada and a couple from some islands off of Portugal. Great group of folks. We had an awesome time, and we're excited to share with you today about how you can get involved and things that are going on there.
I just want to start by saying that our objective for going was to gather information about what the UB Church is doing in Thailand, because it's a new location for us to be in. Just to gather information, see what's going on, and then bring that back to our local churches, just so that you guys know what's going on in other parts of the world that this denomination is a part of. And so to bring that back with opportunities and ways that you can get involved, or just to be praying for them. But something I think we were really blessed with is that even though we did meet that objective and bringing that information back, that we weren't only able to observe what was going on, but to participate what was going on there in the 10 days that we were there. So yes, this is the team of the group that we were a part of, as well as all the missionaries, UB missionaries that are there. And I'm just going to give a little bit of background, kind of to set the stage for what our missionaries are up against when they are in Thailand. Thailand is less than 1% Christian compared to the countries around Thailand. They have I'm not sure the specifics, but a greater percentage of Christians with the same amount of missionary exposure throughout the last couple centuries. And so Thai Buddhism consists of Hinduism, Buddhism, and animism, and it was explained to us kind of like this. This is a combination where everybody gets what they want. Buddhism is considered like the pizza crust that is open to all, and you can just add the toppings that you want. For an example, people wanted a king, but in Buddhism, you can't really justify a king's authority because Buddha had once lived a life as a king, and that didn't get him to nirvana, so therefore it's not valid. But the people wanted a king, and Hinduism allowed that, and so you'd throw Hinduism on there. And so that first picture, that is their current king in Thailand. And then there's also animism, and that's a folk religion that kind of worships spirits, spirit world, animals, sacrifices, and that kind of stuff. So I'll get more into that a little bit, but so that's what they're up against. This picture here is kind of complicated looking, but it's because it's Thai Buddhism cosmology. It's like all those golden spheres on the top. Those are the different levels of heaven. And then you have the hot hells and the cold hells underneath with the red and the blue. And there's a plethora of gods on each of those levels. The very highest level, those gods are without emotion, without gender, without feeling. So put in perspective what they are dealing with. They're not dealing with a loving father. They're dealing with someone who doesn't think about you or care. And they don't have a problem with contradictions. The more complicated something sounds, the more confusing it is. This is to the Thai people, the more legit that religion is. So you can't necessarily come at them with reason, because that doesn't work. It doesn't matter. So the dilemma that the missionaries are up against is, how do you get somebody who is just used to adding things onto a pizza crust to get rid of the whole pizza and just accept the one true God, without just adding it to the mix. So these are spirit houses. Every single property, a person's home property to the airport, to the grocery store, would have a little spirit house or a big one. The smaller the property, the smaller the spirit house required. The bigger the property, like at the airport, it's like a small temple. And that's, you set those up and you invite the spirits of that property or house to come live there, and then you appease it by sacrifices of, I mean, it's really silly. It's like you see red pop opened up and set on the altar, and that's to represent blood, and that's, they just change that out every couple weeks. Yeah, fruit, vegetables. So, and these spirits are neither good or bad. You just make them happy. So that's where they're at with that. And yeah, these are just pictures. You just see Buddha all over the place, idols. Yeah. And this is it's called the Black House, and it's just a representation of animism. The guy who built it was a famous artist, Thai artist, and he was 100% animistic. He would have his house open for people to come see, just because it's, as you can see, there's so many different artifacts and whatnot. But these are all things that they have sacrificed in those buildings. So at 5 o'clock when he was alive, the place would shut down, and then him and a group of people would, things would just be dark and things were happening in those buildings. That one on the far right is an elephant. And it's kind of a status thing. If you can own an elephant, you're like, very high on the status structure. But if you could sacrifice an elephant, that makes you even higher. And he has sacrificed 2. So yeah, it's just a whole complex full of this kind of stuff. And it was very dark and very heavy. And you can tell that that there's just a lot of darkness there. We left feeling very heavy in our hearts. And yeah, it was just very interesting to experience that kind of spiritual warfare.
Here's my short infomercial, but we were able, while we were there, to visit, these are the UB missionaries. We were also able to visit other organizations and nonprofits that these missionaries kind of touch elbows with a little bit, and then they also what's it called? The foundation that they're kind of partnering with to give their to get work visas and stuff through for their new community center. So we have a lot more that we can share. And if your small group would like to hear more, or Sunday school class or something, please feel free to ask us, and we'll be happy to put together a longer PowerPoint and come and share with you. So that being said, visiting the other ministries, there's just an awesome sense of like togetherness that I sensed, and how it's not so much concerned about denomination or, we're trying to keep separate from you guys. You do it a little bit different, but there's a sense of the Spirit's moving, God's moving, He's doing awesome things, and how can we work together and push for the kingdom? So it was just sweet to see that and really encouraging. So we're going to go through these 4 different sets here of missionaries. So the Glunts, they're in the middle, have 4 young children, very happy, awesome family to hang out with. They just had their 4th child in Thailand shortly around the time we had Greta last summer, so we were able to connect on that a little bit. They're originally from Fort Wayne, Indiana, finishing up first 2 years of language school. They're currently home for a home tour, and we may be able to have them come in a couple months and share here, which would be awesome. Brian has been heading up the community center project. It's been since he's got there, breaking ground, finding the property, getting it all set up. It's supposed to be done like a year ago. It's still, we'll have a picture here in a minute. It's still under construction. It's a slow process with the country works on like bribes. You don't get anything done if you don't bribe your contractors and try to speed it up. And they are trying to work with Christian contractors and not bribing. So it's taking longer, but they keep he keeps meeting with people and keeping things moving forward. So, and then the collaborating with the foundation and finding that partnership to be able to make the visas work and stuff. So, and then Rachel also attends language school and volunteers at the Kids Christian School, which we'll talk about that in a second. Paula, a fun, bubbly college student. It's hard to get visas. Like I was saying, you have to do 90 days and then leave and come back. But if you are a student, like Paula is, you can get a visa for 4 years for education visa. And Paula has 2 degrees already, but she's working on a 3rd one for solely for the opportunity to minister to dorm mates and fellow students at this university. Beautiful university. We were able to visit, just breathtaking, the views and whatnot. But God's moving, doing mighty things with Paula and the students when they're away from their families and they're not as ingrained in the religion and the culture, and they're more receptive and open to the Word of God. So it was awesome to hear what he's doing there. These are the Pachecos. They are from Honduras. They've been there a couple of years. I don't think quite as long as the Glunts. They had to learn English so they could be able to work with the Thai English teachers because the Thai, I think, the curriculum and stuff is in English. So they've had to learn 2 languages to minister over there. But they're excited to be there. They do have some struggles with their heart language. No one else really speaks Spanish there. We did go to 1 Mexican restaurant, so there might be 1 or 2 Spanish speakers. But they're a fun couple. We didn't get to talk to them as much. They were actually home for a short home visit, and they came back Friday night, Saturday before we left. But we did talk to them a little bit. So until the community center's open, they have been hosting the art and English classes in their home, and that's been going well. A lot of kids, but they will be ready for the community center when it opens. Did you want just take right over?
This is Hannah Barrett. She is from Ohio, and the background picture is the Shanghai International Christian School. They call it CRICS for short. And she spent her student teaching semester from college there in Shanghai at CRICS School. Loved it and decided to, after she graduated, she's back for another year. And just a little bit about the school. It's really amazing. It's only 9 years old, and they've started out as a co-op group of missionary homeschool families. These families were faced with having to leave the mission field because there wasn't a good education option for their kids. And so they kind of started a co-op, and then God just took it. In 9 years, they were able to raise the funds to build this beautiful, huge school, and then have to tear half of it down and rebuild because they put a highway in too close to where the original building was. So they had to take half of it down and move it. And so it's just a huge campus, and to do all that in such a short amount of time. It's a Christian school. The teachers there are either missionary families who maybe are there for missions, but then one of the parents teaches, or it's a sole missionary project. You raise support. They don't get paid to teach. And so that is an opportunity if you know of someone, or if you are someone who is going into education and have to do a student teaching semester, or want to spend a year on the mission field, and you can use your degree for that.
They're always looking for weird classes.
Yeah, I mean, the classes they offer are the classes that you can give. So it's up to you. What was the other thing?
Just be able to minister to the Thai students.
Oh, yeah. It's not just a Christian school. They leave 20% of their student population open to local Thais so that they can use it as a ministry opportunity. And it's kind of a very popular place to want to go, even with the very rich Thai. It's still a kind of a classist system. The missionaries wouldn't often get in contact with these specific Thai people just because they're rich, and they wouldn't give you, kind of the time of day. You don't move back and forth between the class systems. And so it's a way to minister to a otherwise closed group. And the reason why these people would want to send their kids there is because of the English language aspect of it. Everyone wants their kids to learn conversational English, and all the classes are taught in English.
It's also very well
And it's, yeah, just a well-done school.
quality.
Yeah.
Good.
Sure. This is the community center we were talking about. It's more long than this picture shows. This is just while we were there. Again, this is where the UB Church will operate out of mission-wise once this is complete. All their classes they do in art class, which we were able to kind of run that week we were there, and an English class. And it's just open to kids in the community around the blocks in that town, but then also the parents come and watch, and you make connections there. While we were doing the English class there, they have these big slider doors out their house, and you could just see people like walk by and like stop and stare for 5 minutes and walk on, and then you'd think, oh, they're just probably really concerned for their children in a house full of white people. But then they would come back with some kids. They would stand there and watch you and see what's going on, and they'd go and get some kids and bring them. So it's a really good ministry opportunity. And if that's something that teams would want to come and serve in Thailand, it would be out of that community building that you would work out of.
So when we started out, this trip was about learning what's going on, seeing the vision, understanding how the different ministries work and whatnot. But as we had our planning meetings, we were Skyping together and whatnot, we started to realize there's some other ways that we could serve and encourage the missionaries. A couple weeks, in the last, really it was a week or two before we got there, both of the Glunts both lost a grandma. And these grandmas were very important to him. Brian's grandma especially was like one of his biggest supporters. He'd talk to her like all the time. And they weren't able to go back for either one of the services because their home visit was coming up within the next couple months. So we were able to hold a memorial service on like a Wednesday or Thursday while we were there, and just be able to listen and hear about their grandma's lives and let them share and mourn. And we were just trying to support them. So that went really well. It was cool. And then we did a praise and worship prayer service a Saturday morning before we headed out, which some of the guys on the team were music leaders and whatnot, and we were able to put together this whole thing. We had just the right number of musicians God provided, and provided just enough time, like 10 minutes before we did it, to practice, run through it, a lot of songs. It went well. It was awesome. Just praising the Lord together and trying to encourage them, praying over them, blessing their ministry. So that was cool. Able to do a missionary makeover for Rachel and the girls, able to do manis and petties and stuff, and then have a babysitting, and they were able to, mom and dad were able to go out and have a massage and have a coffee and whatnot. So those are big things. Yeah, those are big things. Have a little time. So that went well, and then we're also each member of our team was able to bring some things for gift baskets. We kind of gathered up each missionary's favorite things and things that they can't really get over there, and then we put all that together at our hotel, and we were able to give them that Saturday morning, which was awesome as well. And then everywhere we would go, we'd learn about different ministries and what they were doing, and then we would pray over them. When we were done, we would pray over each ministry, each missionary, and try to bless them with that. So that was good. And then, did you want this?
This is Joyful Church. It's the church that the Glunts attend. They aren't pastors there. They're not part of a board. They just attend, and that's something about kind of sustainable missions that they try to kind of sustain, that they you don't get too, you help, but you're not the leader. You don't want everyone to kind of cling on to you, and then once you back up, then they can't function. So it's just a rented room in this kind of building complex, and it's a lot of youth, and it was just a really good time. This is a video that we can't play on this system, but it's just their praise team and singing songs that we all know, but it's in Thai, and then they would do some in Spanish or Chinese just because of who was all there. So it's just a really neat experience to worship bilingually. And then this was a video of the Glunts kind of in a joys and concerns part of their service, where they're just thanking their community for their support while their grandmas passed away. But it's just a video to show off their Thai language learning, I guess.
It's a challenge. Thai. Learning Thai is
Yeah.
3 to 5 year real commitment.
Okay, so possible ways to get involved. So this is kind of our fulfillment of why we went, is to bring this information back and then present you with ways that you could participate if you'd like. First off is, of course, just praying for these people. Now, it's hard to pray when you don't know what's going on, so now you know. And then, of course, financial support. There's 4 different UB missionaries. That's just always an option. And then these next 2 kind of go together, to pray for local ties to accept the one true God, and to pray for Christians from the mountain tribes. This is what struck me most through this trip, was coming into it with ignorance and not knowing how different culture could be. There's things that we just think are universal, but they're not, especially on the other side of the world. So going in thinking, okay, we've been here over 100 years, and really, like, you're still less than 1% of a Christian country. In my head, you're thinking somebody's doing something wrong, like something's not right. But we were able to see through all these different organizations who work with different aspects of people that 100 plus years ago, when missionaries started coming, and still today, it's easiest to go up into the mountain tribes, which are people who would come from the surrounding countries who are a little more hostile to them. They'd come to Thailand, but because, like I said, it's still kind of a classist system, they weren't really welcome in the local Thai society. So they would be up into the hills. So they'd have their little villages up in the hills. And those places are like really receptive to the gospel. They would, just a lot of conversions, a lot of people accepting Christ. And so it was really kind of the gravy place to go as a missionary in Thailand. And the local Thais are just so hard to reach because of just their cultural religion that's so ingrained. But now, 100 plus years later, now that those social barriers are kind of breaking down a little bit, these people from the hills are coming down into the cities for work or for school or mission purposes, but they are bringing the gospel down to local Thais who are way more receptive to another native person versus just some white missionaries who are there. So it's just showing how God can set into motion things way farther back than we can think, or think when nothing's happening, something is always going on. And we are just lucky enough to be there to see it starting to bear fruit of all that work beforehand. And then again, another way to get involved is to be a teacher at Cricks. That's always an option. Or to be a missionary long-term or short-term. One of the ladies who was in our group, she's going there for 2 or 3 months while the Glunts are at home leave. She's staying in their house, and she's helping at the school, helping with the community center, just kind of floating. So that's another opportunity.
Greg, the principal at that school, we was able to talk to him, and we were talking about short-term trips, and he just said we kind of need to change how we look at it. And in certain countries, the other folks are going to share today, awesome building trips, and that really works there. And in Thailand, they're a little more developed, and he says we don't need teams to come build things or run VBS camps. We can do that with the Christians that are here. But missions is changing, and short-term teams need to change too. What we need is professionals to be able to share knowledge and expertise to open doors to share the gospel. And that could be a lot of things. A lot of these second or borderline first world countries really admire the West and want to know various skills and jobs that we have. And like somebody had come and opened a tri-fit gym, maybe counseling, teaching, different opportunities are there. So if you're not really into building stuff or something, and you have another skill or another degree that you would love to be able to go and teach other people or share, we could put together a week or two trip to be able to do that. So
I think that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you. There's another team that went to Costa Rica, and Ron Leonard is going to share.
Good morning. I had my name written down here. I was going to share that first, but everybody keeps saying it. So, we went to Costa Rica this year. I got to share something kind of funny. First service, I get super nervous up here. And I said that everybody, they were scary. And then I thought to myself, oh, no, I think they look scary. And I really don't think they look scary, at least most of them. But, I got to apologize for that to them sometime if I ever do this again. But, it's our third year going in a row. We normally go the end of January, the last week of January. This year we took a larger crew than normal. We took 26 people from 4 different churches, and a lot of those were youth. So if you're watching this video, the white people you don't recognize, they're not from this church probably. We went to a new YWAM base. That's where our daughter Alyssa and her husband Mondo are at. I don't know if you guys know Alyssa or not, but Alyssa and Mondo did a lot of the planning, all the logistics for our trip. They took us around. They really did a good job, I thought. This base that we go to, like I said, it's a new YWAM base. We go into the center of the country, San Jose. This is it's in Central America, down by the Panama Canal. That's an easy way to think of it. And we go all the way out to the East Coast, about a mile from the ocean. And I say like an old resort that was closed that they bought really cheap. And it's, if you ever been to our camp at Camp Living Waters, it's like not nearly that nice. But it's in the jungle there. Like I said, it's about a mile from the ocean. I think I said that, which is cool. One day we're out, and outside Alyssa and Mondo's house, there's a sloth up in the tree. A couple days later, there's a bunch of monkeys in the trees, like down, within 15 feet of the ground. I don't think we saw any snakes this year. Last year when we were coming back, we were crossing the bridge to get to the camp, and there's a big old snake up on the rail of the bridge. But just that's kind of painting a picture of the setting for you guys. This year we did 2 builds. We did a house like normal, and we did a roof at a house on the base. That we're going to talk about that a little bit. What we do is we spent like 7 or 8 days, if you count travel, going down there. We spend the first 2.5 days building this house. The last half of that day, we dedicate it to the family and kind of have the community come over for that. Then we do a day of Bible distribution where we go around the community and hand out Bibles and pray for people. Then we do a day of outreach this year. We didn't do this before. We do a day of outreach, and as a field day we planned for a bunch of kids. That was pretty cool. Then we have a free day. Unique thing about this trip this year was normally when you get out and do these builds, they have like 2 or 3 people who are in charge of the house or whatever project you're doing. Just kind of make sure you stay on the right track, you don't screw it up, you do it the way they want it done. This year they had us be the A builder. That's the top people in charge of the house and the roof project, which showed a lot of confidence in us. They've seen us in action before, but they must have forgot how bad we were because they still did that. They didn't have a lot of extra people around to help us do stuff. Alyssa and Mondo were the B builders that kind of assist. We didn't know, but they built a lot of houses down there, and they said this is the first time that they ever knew of that they let a group be in charge of their own builds, which I thought was kind of cool. So we're going to have Kyle Chase is going to share a little bit. he's going to work his way up. And then Vern and Cindy are going to share. And then Ryan and Heather are going to share a little bit. So that was a great trip. Had a lot of fun. Mr. Kyle.
Mr. Chase to you, right?
You're right.
Thanks, Ryan. Well, good morning. My name is Kyle Chase, and I had the pleasure of going on this mission trip with your group here. Actually, as Ron indicated, there was 26 of us all together representing 4 different churches, but a good portion from Kilpatrick. But anyway, Ron asked if I would share just a few stories about the trip from my perspective. And I guess what I'd like to share this morning is just, I kind of struggled at first with the idea of going. Ron and I have known each other a long time. Not real well, but he bumped into him and said, that was a cool trip you guys did last year. And he gave me a call this past summer and said, hey, we're going to go again. Would you be interested? And it was one of those things you just kind of, think about and not sure. But I guess as I thought about it, I had a scripture in mind that was kind of a guiding for me, and that was Matthew 22, verse 26 through 40, where Jesus was asked, Teacher, what is the greatest commandment in the law? And we all know this scripture fairly well. Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all of your heart and all your soul and all your mind. And this is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the laws and prophets hang on these 2 commandments. So basically, sometimes you think about, gosh, am I doing things right in life? But if you can kind of be okay with those 2, love God and love your neighbor and take care of them, that's about 90% of it, right? So that's where I was at. And so I kind of looked at my life a little bit. Obviously, love the Lord, love God, but sometimes I get a little inward focused. Your job, your family, my own church. Wasn't really doing a lot for God's people, and so I thought this was an opportunity to serve others, and so I'm very, very happy that I had the opportunity to go. So a little bit about just some stories. A few things that happened, I think, that were meaningful to me, and I guess what I would consider as changed lives is the first story. I guess I'm just describe as Anna's windows. Anna's the mom. You can probably see her photo once in a while in the screen. Very nice lady. And you can see the little plastic wrap shack that they were living in. And as Ron kind of took charge of Builder A and given each of us some assignments, I was somewhat assigned, windows and trim, and so I had the chance to kind of build the window frames and getting those set, along with Clay was helping in there as well. And one of the things I noticed is Anna would always just be really interested in these windows. We laid them out on the sawhorses and get them framed up, and we would go to get the next window, and she'd be polishing, wiping the window. Not with a Windex or a nice clean rag, but a dirty rag, kind of wiping this window. And as we actually put that first window in, she was jumping and clapping and crying. And through our interpreters, learned that, this is her first window. She's got a window in her house, and how meaningful that is. And for me, the build up to that point had always been about building, right? We're there to do a job. Let's knock out this house for this family. But at that point, it really changed for me to see how important this is and the lives that are changed. And so I just thought that was a really interesting point and a change in my life in the build. And then have our interpreters there. And I know Tim's going to talk a little bit about the staff there from YWAM, but just beautiful young people with a heart for Christ that were our interpreters, and that was such an important role. The second real quick story I want to share was our day of distributing Bibles. And I was a little nervous about that as well. Wasn't really sure what to expect. And, as we kind of were given some instructions, one of the things that Raza kind of shared, the director, is when you go out, the first thing you do is yell, hola, outside their house. Because a lot of them have maybe fences or gates around their home, or they don't have a door to knock on. So if you kind of walk right up to their, you're actually kind of invading their privacy a little bit. So you yell, "Hola." And we came to this one home where we walked up and we saw over in the corner they have a little water spigot, a 5-gallon pail, and a little 3-year-old girl, I'm guessing she was about 2 or 3, had her head down in the bucket and was splashing water. And as we yelled, "Hola," she yelled "Hola" back with her hand in the air, but her head's still in the bucket. We thought that's kind of interesting. But as it turned out, she's a special needs little girl with Down syndrome. And we met maybe not her mom, but the lady who was taking care of her, and realized just through our translators that as we asked, what can we pray for? What are some of the things that we could do for you today? She shared that, this young girl, we didn't understand if she was found, not her own child, but she had the responsibility of taking care of her, and how heavy that was on her heart. And she prayed for God's help to allow her to do that with very few means that she has. But that was a really special day, and as I kind of shared earlier service, we kind of had 2 terms in our group. One was giddy up, that kind of comes from the Leonard family, meaning let's go, and the other was huddle up. And that was kind of a huddle up moment where we kind of circled around this mom and put our hands and prayed for her. And that was, I thought, just really powerful to see some of the lives that were changed. But a part of that day was just obviously asking people to, giving them a Bible and asking what needs they have. And it really comes down to a lot of the same needs that we do. But for me, I guess a change that I had was, that's evangelism. As Raza told us, introduce yourselves as missionaries. And I didn't really think of myself as a missionary. That's someone who gives up their job, leaves home, goes off to a foreign country, right? But that day we were missionaries delivering Bibles and sharing God's love. And so what I came home from that is, how hard is that for me to, put my head up, get out my own door, go to my own neighbors and share the same news that God loves them, wants to have a relationship with them, and could we pray for them? And I think we all took that as a missionary movement. A lot of good would happen in our world. So those are just a few stories that kind of came out of my experience. And thank you, Ron, for asking me to share. It was a great trip. And with that, I think we have Clay coming up next. And Cindy. There you go.
So what I thought was really cool about the trip is the man who gave Anna the house. So we get there, we build Anna the house, and her neighbor Attell, while we were building, she would take pictures of us and just watched us throughout the couple of days. And then we had lunch with them on the 3rd day, and I was speaking to Attell, found out she was a Christian, which I thought was really cool. And then the following day, we came and distributed Bibles. And when Attell saw us, she just had a smile on her face, and she was so glad that we were there. And then, at the very end, as we're kind of leaving the village, Attell's family had invited us to lunch. And then when we went to lunch, we ran into the man who gave Anna the land. I just thought that was really cool. It's like God took us full circle from Anna's house out to the village, and then ended up meeting the man who gave Anna the land. And then on the kids' behalf, the kids during the week would play with the children in the village. And one day, Anthony, who we called Squirrel, he's very active, he prayed this prayer of salvation with the children. And I'm guessing probably several asked Jesus into their heart, but one boy in particular went home, and his mom came to Anthony and said, "What have you done to my son? He has this glow in his face." And he said he has asked Jesus into his heart. And it was just really neat for my kids to experience that.
So like Cindy said, this was a family adventure for us, and this is something that had been on Cindy's heart for a long time. And like many of you, you probably are really good at making excuses that this is not the right time to go. It was in the middle of the school year. Our kids were going to miss school. It's expensive. But God has a way of taking away those excuses if you're just willing to go. We had several people that supported us and then also said as a caveat that if you don't have enough money, come back. We'll make sure there's plenty of people that want to help you along the way. Our boys got all their homework done ahead of time, and then we'd get a daily update from the United States or from Michigan school that said, there's no school today. And the next day there was no school. And the next day there was no school. And oh, by the way, the government shut down in Michigan. There's going to be no school. So our boys actually came back and they were about even with their classmates, having done all their work ahead of time. So that was neat, and God provides for that. A couple thoughts that stuck with me as I looked back was building a home was kind of why we went, and we accomplished that. And it was really humbling at the key ceremony. We stood around the house, and they passed the key to the house around to each of us, and we each got to give them a blessing. And it was really overwhelming for Ozul. He really didn't know what to say. He was practically speechless, and just really appreciated what we had done. And you can tell from the video when Anna walked in the house. What you don't know is that she didn't realize that the house was going to be furnished when they walked in. Cindy and the girls had taken the family shopping for food to get them to get them off site so that we could furnish the house with bunk beds and a stove and a table and chairs. And it was neat to see on the day that we made hot dogs for the community and fed the community that we kind of looked over and they were sitting at their kitchen table eating hot dogs and like they were home. So that was really cool. Anna shared that she'd never had a bed of her own that she didn't have to share with her family. She'd never had a kitchen inside, and like Mr. Kyle said, never had a window. Most of our sheds at home are better than what they were living in, and they'd been happy to live in our shed at home. But we gave them something a little better than that, so that was fun. We got to build relationships with Rasta and Elsie, who ran the base there, with Mondo and Alyssa. We got to see what servants' hearts look like. They're kind of always racing to the back of the line to put others ahead of themselves. Rasta and Elsie's roof, which we worked on, had been leaking, I think, since they'd got on the base, and their focus was always on building homes for others. End of the week, we did Bible distribution, which was a little bit scary for me. It'd be scary in my own community, let alone the language barrier. But once we got going, it was pretty easy. Costa Ricans have the same prayer requests many of us have. They want healing from sickness. They want jobs so they can provide for their families, and they want peace and harmony in their family, which all of us can use. We went to several homes. No one said that they didn't want prayer. Everybody wanted prayer for something, from a child with severe disabilities that a family was taking care of to just everyday life. And it was an awesome opportunity to take our boys. I think it was well worth the time and the effort. And I thank Cindy for encouraging me to go, because I don't think I would have otherwise. So. Ryan's next. He's our professional builder and problem solver.
Well, before the trip, in the planning stage, Ron asked me if I'd take on the second project, was this roof that was on the base. And they kind of told us what they had in mind. They sent us a few pictures and plans, and it was a little vague, but we said we were up for the challenge to see what we'd find when we got there. But the Lord worked it out great. They got the material, and Tim and Tammy and me and Heather and Vern and the boys helped out, and it come together in great shape. The Lord provided everything and gave us lots of shade to work in. And we found it a little humorous that we were some of the older ones on the team, and we were stuck climbing around on this wobbly steel frame 12 feet up in the air. But everybody was safe, and it turned out great. And the Lord just took excellent care of us. So Heather's going to share a little bit.
I just wanted to share a little bit about the day that we had the field day. And I also wanted to talk about how the Lord worked. To me, it's two lessons, but the same thing that God was trying to teach us over and over. First, he was teaching it to the staff there at YWAM, because they had a totally different family picked out to start with that they were going to have the house built for. And the day they got there with all the material, the government or somebody came and said, no, you can't build here. This is not going to work. It's not going to happen here. And they're like, oh, now what do we do? You know, I don't know when it was, but it was fairly close to when we were coming. And so God led them to this other family, which, as you've heard, worked out wonderful. And they were extremely appreciative, extremely needed a house really badly. And so then when we went to do field day, the YWAM staff had that all planned. We were going to do it right in the community where their base is, which is not very far away from this big soccer field where they were going to have the field day. And so we all came up with a game. We each had a partner, and we came up with a game. We were going to play with all these hundred of kids. The YWAM staff had sent out 90 invitations to invite all these people to come to the field day. And so we all came up with games, and we get there at 8 o'clock in the morning or whatever, unpack the entire bus and haul everything across this huge field, gigantic field, you know. There's no kids. And so we're sitting there, and half of our team and half of the staff, most of the staff, took off to go try to drum up some kids and bring them back. And we all sat there, and finally one lady showed up with one little 3-year-old girl, and she and I played for a while, which I thought was pretty fun because I was kind of missing my granddaughters. And so, but hardly any kids, you know, in this huge field. And they kept trying to find kids, and nobody would come. So eventually the staff decided, okay, we're going to pack everything back in the bus, and we're going to go somewhere else and where there's kids. So I think maybe the draw was that it was a super hot day, it was a Sunday, and the beach was only like a few blocks away. So I think maybe all the kids were at the beach, not sure. So they packed us all in the bus, and the one staff member had rounded up 9 or 10 kids, and we picked her up on the way out of town, plus the little 3-year-old and the little 7 or 8-year-old boy also got on the bus with us, and that little 3-year-old's mom came. And they drove us like 45 minutes away, a long ways, and took us to a little teeny tiny field where we had to combine with another group for our games because there wasn't enough room to spread out for the whole games. But there was kids there, and there was like 90 or 100 kids that showed up to play our games and to hear about Jesus and to eat lunch, because we provided lunch, and the Elsie had made it and sent it to later on after. And so all these kids were there, and I just felt like God was trying to teach the staff and to teach us that sometimes God closes a door, but he opens a window and works something out different than the way you planned. And if you just go with the flow, he'll work it out. And that was a good lesson for me to learn, and I think for all of them to learn as well. Before I'm done, I also want to put a real short plug in here for Family Promise. Family Promise is going to be sending some people here the end of April to stay in our church in the evenings and spend the night here. So if any of you want to help with that, making meals or staying the night to chaperone or anything like that, you could see Jeff Gibbs or Tammy Bradbeck or me about that, and let us know that you want to help. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I guess it's afternoon. whatever it is. My name's Tim Broadbeck. Switch gears just a little bit. I actually went on the Homes of Hope trip, but I'm up here to talk about an opportunity I had to go teach with Youth with a Mission. The acronym for that is YWAM, and YWAM runs numerous programs. Homes of Hope is one of them. They have a course they call DTS, Discipleship Training School. And I had went on the Homes of Hope trip 2 years, and when we got done in January or February of 2018, Tammy and I, on our way home, we said, well, we're not going to go again. We won't go the next year on that probably. We'll look for something else to do. Well, God has a little bit of a sense of humor, I think, because next thing I knew, we were going twice the next year. In April, I got asked to come down and teach at this DTS course. And I gave what I like to say is the standard American Christian answer. I said, I'll pray about it, and I'll take the time that I said I'd pray about it and figure a way to get out of it. But the Lord was pretty insistent that I go, so I said yes, we'd go. And luckily Tammy went with me. And this first picture is myself and the two students, Anthony, a.k.a. Squirrel, and Keisha and Tammy. And so we went down in December of 2018 for a week, I believe it was 28 hours of teaching, and I was asked to teach on biblical worldview and evangelism, both of which I felt very unqualified to teach. I didn't feel comfortable teaching it, but I said the Lord wanted me to go, so I said I'd do it. And I really studied hard. I mean, if people that really know me would know I like to procrastinate and put things off, especially things that I'm not familiar with, or things I'm very familiar with. One of those two extremes, I like to just put it off. But the Lord really was working on me, and He said, get organized, get on schedule. And He also told me to use my resources. And by resources, I mean we got a great staff here at Kilpatrick. You got Rocky, you got Vic, you got numerous other small group leaders with a wealth of knowledge. And I got to tap into all of those to help get ready to go. And so about a week before, first week of December, a little bit before I left, God told me I was ready to go. He said, you've got your lesson done. You did a lot of studying. And He said, you like to talk, so you're going to be okay. And that wasn't an audible thing, but it was just a sense that came over me. And I said, okay, I'm ready to go. So we got on the plane, headed down there. Got there, observed the class for a little bit. And the kids were asking questions. They were engaging the teacher that was there. And I thought, this is going to be fun, But there's a little bit of a hiccup. There's a language barrier, but I had a good interpreter. And I said, this is going to be a piece of cake. Someone can roll through these screens, I guess. There's a couple pictures here. The two students. Here's I'm sitting on a stool up front teaching. Got a whiteboard with writing everything down. Things are going to go great, Well, the first hour and a half session couldn't have went any worse. And if I could have hit the button and got me out of there, I'd have hit it. I looked at Tammy, and we've been married quite a while. She's seen the look in my eye, and she knew I was in trouble. I mean, because I said, I was having the moment of doubt. God said I was ready to go, and I was willing to go, and I said that I was reliant on God, and He was going to get me through it, or, it was going to make things good. But I realized there in about an hour and a half I had one foot in the boat, and 1 foot on land because I was still trusting myself. And in that half hour in between classes, I just told God, I said, I cannot do this. I said, you're going to have to do it. And I'm just going to totally rely on you. And I went back, and God impressed on me to just tell him a little bit about my life story and about, just how our family functioned, how we'd had our foster kids in. And that started building a relationship with those kids. And from that point on, they knew I wasn't just some white guy coming down there, throwing the Bible at them. They knew because I shared a little bit of my heart, why I was there, and God really used that. And for me, and then it was a really growing experience for me because, 28 hours is a lot of teaching, and when you know that everything you have spent 6 months preparing for probably is not going to work, you can either grasp at straws or grasp onto God. And I just said, well, I'll just grab onto God. And he, in my preparation, I'd listened to a lot of stuff, and I knew I had wrote down in my notes Genesis chapter 3, and I wanted to teach on Genesis chapter 3. I knew that was going to be a critical part. It's how sin entered the world, and for biblical worldview, that I thought was a critical chapter to explain. But in my notes, I wrote Genesis chapter 3, but for 6 months, I couldn't write down any thoughts on that chapter. But yet knew it was going to be critical. Well, that night, I woke up the first night, after the first day of teaching, went to sleep, woke up about 3 in the morning, and Genesis chapter 3 is on my mind, on my heart. And so I got up and sat at that little table right there, and very peaceful, nothing else to do there but, talk to God. Opened up Genesis chapter 3, and in 20 minutes I wrote 2 pages of notes that I can tell you they didn't come from me, they came from God. I wrote it down. That was over a day's teaching right there. And I have read Genesis chapter 3 hundreds of times, I'm sure, but I got new truth pointed out to me in that 20 minutes that I'd never seen about God and about how he views the world. And then he did the same thing again another day with the story of Jacob. And I learned to use a combination of Bible stories that they were familiar with. I could use up the studying I did, the Bible verses that were wrote on the wall or the whiteboard. I could use those, tie them in with the Bible stories, but God knit that all together. But he really used the key point, I think, is he used my personal story of my life to show my vulnerabilities, my struggles, and even though the cultural differences, totally different culture, we could relate to God together through those stories and through our interactions. I didn't tell the earlier service, but I went down there specifically. I was not going to use my testimony because I thought that would draw attention to me. Well, God told me to use my testimony and tell it to him. And I thought, that's crazy. Until Anthony, a squirrel, was struggling with some of the same stuff that I had struggled with. And so then I got at a whole other level, got to talk to him about the struggles that we both had in common. And, God was just amazing. And I would just, it was really cool. I got stretched. It was a lot of work. It got stretched, but I learned a lot. And I kept right on learning. I went back with the Homes of Hope trip the second time. And originally we signed up for that because I had 2 granddaughters that were potentially going to go. And they ended up not going. And so I'm thinking, well, why, I'm getting a little older, and I've been down there once, and anybody can hammer nails and throw lumber up, and there's 26 people going. So all the, stuff going, why not to go? But I went down and had a great time. And then at the end of the trip, I found out why I really went the second time. The two students that we had were there for the Homes of Hope build, and they were going out on their outreach. The final part of their DTS training is they were going out for multiple weeks into another country down there, and that was the final part of their training. Well, there was one hitch for them, is they needed $5,000 total. They already had two of it, and this, I can't remember the day. It was like a, I don't know, Friday or Saturday night. And the next day, they were going out, and they needed $3,000 yet. Well, these two young Costa Ricans, they're not coming up with the money. Where are they going to get that money? And so the Lord prompted me to bring them up. I just explained their situation to the group. And 5 minutes later, they had commitment for all their money, and off they go, which is great. But the interesting part to me was here this Keisha, who she told me she knew that God, she said, I never had any doubt the money would come in. And she's telling me this the night before she needed the money. The money had to be committed to the next day. And she said, God told me the money was coming. She said, I never once questioned it. And I thought, wow, that's something that this old guy can learn from, is that level of trust. And she wasn't surprised. She was thankful, but she was not surprised that God provided that money in the 12th hour. And it was fun to be a part of it, and it was a really great thing to learn, and something I'll always remember and treasure. So.
Thanks, Tim. All right, this morning we are going to observe communion, and it kind of follows on what's been said. Christ came, he died, he rose again, and that has deeply affected and transformed lives, and they then in turn go out and transform others and invest in them. In Jeremiah chapters 30 to 33 is a small book within a book. It's called the Book of Consolation, to console the Israelites in their darkness, in their darkest days, and to tell them that they're not forgotten. They are not cast aside, but God is going to do a new thing. God is going to establish a new covenant through himself that will provide grace and salvation for his people. Jesus is that new covenant. And this is the words Jeremiah writes to the people who were in suffering at that time. The days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the people of Israel and with the people of Judah. It will not be like the covenant I made with their ancestors, when I took them by the hand to lead them out of Egypt, because they broke my covenant, though I was a husband to them, declares the Lord. This is the covenant I will make with the people of Israel after that time, declares the Lord. I will put my law in their minds, I will write it on their hearts, I will be their God, and they will be my people. No longer will they teach their neighbor or say to one another, know the Lord, because they will all know me, from the least of them to the greatest, declares the Lord. For I will forgive their wickedness, and I will remember their sins no more. Then in Hebrews chapter 9, verse 15, it tells us Jesus has come and provided us an eternal inheritance through this new covenant. We're going to offer communion today, and our communion is open to all believers. First, let's take a moment to prepare our hearts to receive the elements with a clean heart, and we will have a moment of silence to reflect and remember the price that Christ paid so we might have forgiveness from the penalty of sin and victory over the power of sin. So take some time to thank Jesus for what he's provided for you through his death and resurrection. And so just take a few moments now.